Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I gave this leadership presentation at a local church, and they asked me to narrate the slides and then upload it as a video so that those who were not able to attend would have access to the information. So that's what I am going to do. My name is Keith Major. I'm a native of Charleston, South Carolina, also known as the Chuck, also known as Chucktown, also known as the Holy City. I'm a 1995 graduate of Hampton University. I wore the naval uniform for 24 years and retired. I flew P-3s and then I did a stint as an intelligence officer. Currently, I'm working on a global MBA at the Shiloh College of Business at University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I am married with two children. And you can reach me on Twitter or Instagram. So, this is a presentation on effective Christian leadership. We're going to define leadership, cover the four basic leadership styles, and then go through some additional styles, do a comparison of leaders and managers, and then I'll give you some of my personal Keith Majorisms on leadership, and then we'll cover Christian leadership and tie what we've already covered into the Bible, and we're going to use that via a story in the book of John. Uh, and then we'll talk about the traits of a Christian leader, and then we'll wrap it up. So, what is a leader? There are many definitions, there are many definers of definitions, and you will get almost anything. And if you ask the question, you won't get the same answer twice. But in short, a leader is simply someone who has followers. Whether it be the guy in the big office with the title or the guy with the mop and the bucket swabbing the floor, if that person has followers in whatever capacity, they are a leader. So let's talk about leadership styles. Leadership style refers to uh, an approach taken by a particular leader. It's not the what, but the how. How is it that that leader accomplishes the things that they accomplish? We're different people. We have different backgrounds, different upbringings, different DNA, different personalities. So the way that each individual person goes about doing something is different. So the key is that you need different styles for different situations. And there is no true leadership style. I'm a proponent that the best style is the one that works. However, with knowledge of the different leadership styles and the pros and cons, and an understanding of the leadership situation that you win, ultimately I feel as though you will be more successful. Knowledge is indeed power. Some leaders are prone to use one particular style, and we will cover this in later slides. You have leaders that have the ability to switch their style based on the situation. So, before we go into the styles, let's cover a few things about leaders. So, an effective leader, there are basically four things that a leader can relate to. There's rational, which is your mind, relational, which is the heart, practical, and directional. The two most important ones, I feel, are rational and relational. In order to be an effective leader, you have to have a connection to a follower's intellect and to that follower's heart in order to make them passionate about the thing that they are doing and also passionate about being a member of the organization. So we have an X and Y chart in quadrants, and we're going to compare rational and relational on two axes. So let me explain how this chart works. Down in the lower right, if you have someone that's high on a rational level but low on a relational level, that means they have a lot of intellect but maybe not a great people person. That person is a thinker. And then let's go to the top left. The opposite, if you have someone that's high on the relational level, that means I can appeal to you, your soul, and your spirit and your heart, but I am not necessarily the most intelligent guy. I'm the feeler. That's the leader that you can tell your problems to, that they're empathetic and they reach you emotionally. Now, if you're not very smart and you're not a people person, you're a muddler. You're not doing a whole lot. And then the opposite of that is an engager. Okay, now leadership styles. This is another X and Y chart. And if you look on the upper right, it has the scoring system, which basically lays out efficiency and engagement. Efficiency is the yellow, engagement is the green, aqua, whatever color that is. The key is to look at the total scores. The total score in yellow represents efficiency, and the total score in green represents the engagement. And if you look at the chart, you will see the numbers are different. Some leadership styles have higher and lower numbers in certain areas. So if we look in the top left, controlling, a controlling leader is very efficient. They get a lot of things done, but there's zero engagement from the followers, right? No uh, team consciousness and no ownership. Um, and then if we look on the right hand side under empowering, you'll see that's a 7 and a 10. So, an empowering leader, one who merely gives their followers instructions and then allows them to go off and do great things, that's 7 for efficiency. But look, the engagement is a 10. So those followers are very plugged in to the organization and to the leader. You can take some time later and look at these scores and then maybe make a guess about which leadership style you are and then figure it out. Okay, the four basic leadership styles are autocratic, bureaucratic, laissez faire, and democratic, and we're going to go through those. An autocratic leadership style is the classic leadership approach. I'm the boss, you're not the boss, do as I say do. The leader in this situation retains as much power as possible, and some would even argue that if you don't have all of the power, you don't have any of the power. They don't consult the staff. It's basically my way or the highway. They have their own vision, they don't share it, and that's how they do business. Now, let's go back. So, autocratic leaders are also called dictators. So here we have Hitler and Mussolini. The autocratic leader is the classical approach to leadership. The boss is the boss. I'm the man. Do as I say do. They don't consult the staff. They don't consult any of the followers. They simply issue instructions, and the staff is expected to obey those instructions. Autocratic leaders are also referred to as dictators. Hence, we have a picture of Adolf Hitler and Mussolini on the slide. Now, President Donald J. Trump, do we think that he might have an autocratic leadership style? I think here in these first few months of his presidency, we've seen that. But here are the cons to being an autocratic leader. They're greatly criticized. That one way communication without feedback kind of degrades or erodes the communication within the organization. And if an autocratic leader makes a poor decision and that decision has no input from the staff, you could put your organization at risk. And an autocratic leadership style is also unsuitable when the workforce is knowledgeable about their jobs and they expect to have their opinions heard. However, being an autocratic leader is not always a bad thing. If your staff is new or untrained, um, or if you can only get effective supervision like through really detailed orders, or the staff hasn't responded to any other leadership style. We've been through one leader, didn't work. Went through another leader, it didn't work. Rest assured, the third leader is probably going to be uh, an autocrat, and it will work for a time. Also, if you have a limited time to make a decision, an autocratic leader is best because from the previous chart, we saw that the directing leadership style is the most efficient with respect to time. Should not be used when you already have a staff that's on pins and needles, maybe some prior event. The staff expects to be heard or have interaction into your process, or morale is low and turnover is high. How many organizations is that in America? The next leadership style is the bureaucratic leadership style. Colin Powell is often referred to as the great bureaucrat, and being a bureaucrat is not a bad thing. A bureaucrat manages by the book, and they're all about policies and procedures and staying within the confines of the rules. So Colin Powell had a very tough job, not once but twice, uh, with the Joint Chiefs, and then he was the Secretary of State. So a lot of rules and regulations in both of those jobs. The bureaucratic leadership style is most effective when the staff performs routine tasks, or they need to understand policies and procedures, or when they're required to handle money. So, any job requiring accounting or finance, a bureaucratic leader is probably best. This style of leadership is not effective when work habits have formed that are hard to break, like you're trying to change the culture of an organization, or the staff has simply lost interest in either the mission or in the organization. The next style is democratic leadership style, which is also known as the participative style. It encourages the staff to participate in operations and decision makings, and the key is to keep the staff informed about everything. This works best in an organization where you're dealing with a lot of creative people, or anything that requires thinking outside the box. So Steve Jobs, a guy that ran Apple, an organization that prided themselves on innovation, he was a democratic leader. It's most effective when you want to keep the staff informed, uh, when you want the staff to participate in sharing decision making, or if the problem is large and complex and you have to delegate certain parts of problems to other people. Uh, and when you want to encourage team building and participation. It shouldn't be used when you don't have time to get everyone's input, or if the manager feels threatened. If you have a leader that's threatened by that level of input, it's not going to work. So, here in the picture, if we're a group of firemen, we don't really have the time to sit around and get everybody's input on how we're going to fight the fire. Okay, what do you think? Yeah, what do you think we should do? Ooh, this fire sure is hot. That's a time sensitive uh, incident, so you're going to have to attack that right away, and everyone may not have input. Laissez faire leadership style is hands off. Um, the manager doesn't provide a whole lot of direction, just whatever happens, happens. The picture is a gentleman named Michel Legrand. He was French. He was a mathematician, and the French government at one point went to the business owners in France to ask them how government could help the business owners, and Mr. Legrand responded, laissez nous faire. which means we will do it or let us do it. In essence, they wanted no government intervention. And so that's why when you hear the term laissez faire, it's most often associated with economics. Ronald Reagan was a it ain't the government's job to tell people how to do things kind of guy. He was a laissez faire leader. He was all about deregulation uh, and allowing governors of states to do certain things. Laissez faire is great if your staff is highly skilled and they know their jobs and it doesn't require a lot of tinkering from the leader, then you can use that leadership style. It shouldn't be used when the staff feels insecure or the manager is either unable or unwilling to provide proper feedback. So, this is Sean Spicer. To me, he has the hardest job in the world, but he does what he needs to do, I guess. Laissez faire guy, totally not in control. He's just a talking head. He could say something at 8 a.m. and by 11 Eastern Time, it's completely changed via a couple of tweets from Mr. Trump. Now, let's talk about some additional leadership styles. Not the four basics, but some that have greater nuances. The first one is a transformational leader. That's someone that makes changes in themselves, in others, and the organization. A charismatic person that solves some great thing. In this example, we have Martin Luther King. Obviously, he was a transformational leader because he had to deal with the burden of civil rights and the struggle in the 60s. Another type of leader is a transactional leader. Those guys emphasize getting things done and they're strictly by the book and they have a set of rewards and punishments that they use. If you do this, I'll do that. And this is Norman Schwarzkopf, obviously the guy everybody knows who he is. Ran the first Gulf War, had a lot to manage, and did a great job. Situational leadership. These are the guys that can change their leadership style to fit the situation. So here my example is Bill Belichick. I'm absolutely not a New England Patriots fan, but I respect the guy for what he and his organization has been able to do. Yes, I know they've won 5 championships, but I don't think they've received the rings yet. So all of the pictures only have four. But the point is, every year the Patriots show up to camp, they're a different team because instead of fitting the players to an offensive scheme, Bill Belichick surveys the talent that he has on hand and he tweaks the playbook around what it is the players are able to accomplish. And in my opinion, he does it better than anybody else in the league. So if you have a wide receiver that can only run 2 routes on a route tree, Bill Belichick is not going to complain about the 7 routes the guy can't run. He's going to call every play in the playbook that features the 2 routes that you can run, and you're going to be successful. Servant leadership. Servant leader is a servant first. Um, and the key here is servant leaders often get thrust into their leadership and it's unattended. So Nelson Mandela actually started off, he was a security guard at a mine in South Africa and he was going to night school working on a law degree and then there was a strike and he all of a sudden became the smart guy and how he got from mediating a strike at a mine to being the father of ending uh, apartheid, it just kind of fell on him, and he was the guy that got it done. So, in conclusion, the 3 factors that influence which leadership style to use, it's the leader's personal background, right? You're the sum of your experiences. What do you bring to the table as the leader? The followers being supervised, you have to account for what they bring to the table. and then the organization. You have to consider those three things in leadership. Now, I'll save you 2 years of business school and 24 years of military service, and I'll give you a 60-second PhD in leadership. In your mind's eye, think of the best boss and the worst boss that you ever had. When it comes to the worst boss, think about all the things that you hated about that guy and don't do those things ever. The great boss you had, think about all the things that made that boss great and do those things all the time. If you generally go about your business of leadership in that fashion, you'll be okay. It's okay to take things from other leaders that they did that you like that were successful. And if you flip that pancake over, there are many jobs that I had where my boss was my good example of a bad example where I said, when I get in charge, I am never going to do it that way. So let's talk about the difference between leaders and managers. To me, managers, they just do stuff, they manage things. Uh, Managers do it right, leaders do the right thing. To me, leaders more about people. Managers are more about stuff and work. You need them both. You just have to figure out what the best situation is, right? So, leaders tend to connect daily with the work and the goals. Managers, they're just short term. Leaders, more long range vision. Leaders tend to have a greater connection with the people and they see people as people. A manager sees people as just employee numbers on a spreadsheet or in a database. Um, a manager wants to be liked, but a leader wants to earn the respect of the people. Me personally, when I was in positions of leadership, I never wanted my subordinates to follow me because of what I wore on my collar. I wanted them to follow me because they bought in to the vision of what I was trying to do and they thought that my plan afforded them the greatest degree of survivability on the battlefield. So, regardless of what I had on my collar, I wanted my guys to believe in me and buy into me and support me. Leaders care about results. Managers typically they're all about you know details and just stuff. So, great leaders become leaders to achieve something and not to be someone. You have those people out there that are all about the trappings of a job. The corner office with the window, the key to the executive washroom, the parking spot with their name on it. Those guys to me are managers. Those are people with titles and no testimony. And they're hardly ever effective, in my opinion. Great leaders also listen to leadership wherever it is expressed. In the military, we're all about subordinate leadership. So just because someone isn't in a particular office or have a particular grade or have a particular title doesn't mean that they cannot be a leader and it doesn't mean that the input they have is not valuable. Organizations that survive and thrive foster leadership throughout the system, right? In the military, we refer to this as subordinate leadership. You have to groom NCOs to become independent thinkers and leaders because those guys are the backbones of the force. That's where the rubber meets the road, and you want those guys as capable as possible. Lincoln was asked how long it took him to write the Gettysburg Address, and his answer was all my life. Again, a leader is the sum of their experiences, right? You didn't become a leader in one day. You got to where you were after a life's worth of experiences, and people need to be able to tap into that to figure out who you are as a leader. Now, Keith Major's thoughts on leadership. This is just Keith Major. Don't go out there and say this guy said this or said that because I haven't written a book yet, but I will. If you're going to lead, you have to be optimistic. In the military, we call that PMA, positive mental attitude. If you're not optimistic, why would the people who follow you be optimistic? I have little tolerance for people who exude negative energy, those guys that never have anything positive to say, the guy who you guaranteed will squeeze the juice out of the lemon. Dude, you're not advancing us any closer to mission completion, so you need to go somewhere else. If you don't if you don't love people, leadership is not for you. Leadership is all about valuing and empowering people, and if that's not your thing, you got to find another occupation. Be absolutely clear what you stand for. Integrity should be a leader's hallmark. There should never be a question about what you stand for or what you believe in. Three more keys to leadership. As a leader, you should be able to tell a compelling story about yourself, tell a compelling story about the organization, and make people feel as though they're an essential part of the team. You should be able to toot your own horn, not necessarily giving your accomplishments, but you should be able to communicate to people who you are, the essence of your person. You should be able to communicate that to the team. You, as a leader, should be the organization's biggest cheerleader. If someone says, why should I work or attend or go to a particular organization? You should just start talking and go on and on and on and on because you are the champion of the organization. Making people feel important. Every person on the team plays a part, and that part is integral to success. And as a leader, you have to reinforce that every day to every individual that everyone has their part, and no part is more important than any other part. Mistakes. Mistakes are okay, but you cannot make the same mistake twice. Only make new mistakes. If we're making repeated mistakes, we're doing something wrong. So I recommend that you communicate to your organization new mistakes are okay. But if I'm looking at something for the second, third, fourth, or fifth time, we've got a problem. Leaders lead by asking questions, not by issuing instructions. How can you tell somebody what to do if you have not taken the opportunity to assess the situation at hand? You haven't asked one question. It's all, giving this instruction about solving a problem you don't understand. It doesn't work. And here's why I think you have some people to do this. You have those guys that feel as though they have to be, if they're the leader, it's required that they be the smartest person in the room. I disagree with that. Some folks think that way. I don't think that's true. So they can never be wrong. They can never be infallible. Somewhere along the line, they got this idea that the leader is the guy that must always come up with the right answer. To me, I think that's wrong. Or they just don't like what you're telling them because, they're fragile, sensitive, whatever. Those are the three reasons why leaders, in my opinion, don't communicate. So now, the next question people are going to say, well, what if I'm not the boss? What if I'm just Joe Snuffy, Joe Blow down in the plant? It does not matter. Remember, in the previous slide, we said that leadership should be fostered up and down the chain. Just because you don't have the title doesn't mean you can't be the leader because from the very beginning, a leader is anyone who has followers. You don't really need the boss to solve a problem. You can solve it on your own. So you convince superiors, in my opinion, by doing. So if I've already taken action before I even inform you of the problem, you're probably going to be inclined to follow along what I said or did, especially if I've already resolved it. So the key, if you are not the boss and you identify an issue, find other people in the organization who see the issue the same way that you do. You guys pull together, come up with a plan, share ideas, come up with a solution, and just take action. I'm a proponent that It's far better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission. So solve the problem first and then go tell the leadership. And we can argue about it. You can yell at me. You can threaten to fire me. But the problem has already been solved. You do not have to have the title to be the leader. Okay, so now you're saying, well, Keith Major, you said this was a Christian leadership presentation, and we have not talked about the Bible not one time. Well, we're going to talk about the Bible now. So, Christian leadership is undergirded by a divine principle, uh, and good looks does not make good leaders. Again, from a previous slide, you have those guys, managers, that are all about the trappings of a job. Just because you look like a leader doesn't mean that you are a leader. However, we have a tendency to pick our leaders on some concept of what we think a leader should be, but it's not really based on anything. So, from the last election, how many times do we hear Mr. Trump doesn't have the temperament to be president? Mr. Trump doesn't look like a president. Mr. Trump doesn't talk like a president. Where do we get this notion that a president should be this statesman that quotes all this Shakespearean stuff and all this philosophical stuff? Nowhere is that written. That's just what we think. But what are we basing that standard on? How should we choose leaders? And what should the standard be? It should be based on the Bible if we're talking about Christian leadership. That's the rule, the book, the guide that we use for all things. God sometimes chooses people you would never have chosen, and sometimes we as people choose leaders that God never ever would have chosen. So, what does the scripture say? The scripture reading, and I'm not going to read it here, like you can pause and pull out your Bible. It comes from the book of John, chapter 10, verses 1 through 21, which is the story of the Good Shepherd. So, in this story, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and he's giving them this parable about how a good shepherd comes through the gate and anyone that comes over the fence or comes from some other direction is a thief or a robber. And if he's the good shepherd, the sheep know the sound of his voice, and he, as the shepherd, knows all of the sheep. The Pharisees don't understand it, and then Jesus goes on to explain to them how the parable works. And the key is that in that parable, the gate to the pen where they keep the sheep is God. So, in order to be a good shepherd, you have to go through God to get to the sheep to be successful. And in there, he also talks about hirelings. A hired hand has no connection with the sheep. He's only there for the money, so that if the wolf comes, the hired hand will run away and leave the wolf to devour the sheep. But a good shepherd will lay down his life for the sheep. So, as a leader, if you are not prepared to sacrifice for the sheep, you are not the good shepherd. So, take some time to read the book of John, 10th chapter, verses 1 through 21, and really understand the parable because Keith Major would argue that that is the biblical definition of leadership in those 21 verses. So, true leadership is in your worship and honor of God. And the greatest characteristic that a leader must have is love. In order to be a great leader, you have to love the people. We've had plenty of faulty and wrong leadership, so now here we're giving you the proper definition. So, if we were in a group, I would ask you in your group, why is it that you want to lead? What is in your heart? What is your desire? What is your motivation to lead? Because we all have seen that leadership is awfully tough. Dealing with people is awfully tough. So, what come ye to do? So, if you are viewing these slides, just take a moment to reflect about why it is that you want to lead people. And do you really love people? And we're not talking about the love, oh, I love her. Like, no. We're talking about the love that God used to create the world. Do you love enough to suffer at the hands of your own people to advance them? Because people will be hard on you and will say all kinds of things about you as a leader. Do you have what it takes to endure that hardness and press on? The second commandment says, love your neighbor as yourself. So without love, you cannot lead. A leader must also be a servant of the people. You cannot have self hating people as leaders. You cannot have leaders who look down their noses. You have those guys in positions of leadership who are the I'm high on the mountain, you're down in the valley, I got it, you got it to get, right? I'm holier than thou. I went to this school, I got this degree. That's not what leadership is all about. If you cannot accept people for who and what they are, if you cannot look beyond people's faults to love them and lead them in order to accomplish something, leadership is not for you. Can you serve people that you think you're better than? That's a tough question. That's some heavy stuff right there. A lot of times, the people you lead aren't as talented as you, maybe not as well off as you. They don't have the means that you have, but can you still lead them and can you still love them and care about them? The downfall of many leaders, ego. Ego will undermine your ability to lead. I think it's Matthew 20 and 25. Jesus says to the disciples, hey, over there, them Pharisee guys, them Roman guys, they get these funny hats. They get these little scepters with little eagles on them. They get these chairs to sit in. Y'all ain't getting none of that, right? Those who shall come first shall be last. That's Matthew 20:25. You have to be a servant leader, a right. The relationship between a leader and a subordinate should not be as a master and a servant, but as a scholar and a pupil. Think about that. Humility has to be a fundamental characteristic of a leader, or you're just going to go down the wrong path. So, if you're someone that chose leadership in order to be somebody, appear to be something, to satisfy some ego need that you have, it's not going to work. So, you have those leaders in the picture who really they're just a little kitty cat, but when they look at themselves in the mirror, they're a powerful lion. But that's all in their mind because when the followers look at them, they just a kitty cat. Another thing that a trait that a Christian leader must have is intelligence. So this is a picture of sperm under a microscope. You got the head and you got the tail. The tail just wiggles. That's all it does, just wiggles. It gets the sperm from point A to point B. All of the DNA, all of the knowledge, all of the direction of where we need to go, the mission at hand, that's all contained in the head of the sperm. So as a leader, which end you on the wiggling end or you on the intelligent end? How can you lead people and tell them what to do if you as the leader don't even know where you headed? It becomes the blind leading the blind. Intelligence is another fundamental mark of a good leader, as well as endurance and hardness. Leadership is hard, people are hard, but you know what? If God ordained you to lead, He made you harder than the rest of them. They might be hard, but you harder. So, lastly, leadership is like swimming. You can't learn it in no book. You just got to jump in the pool and paddle around and get it. You can get some instructions. You can go down to the Y, take them Red Cross lessons. But at the end of the day, you got to do it. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, Twitter, Instagram, or you can email me or leave comments down in the YouTube box, and I will gladly get back to you, to all leaders and aspiring leaders. I hope this was useful, and I hope you got at least one or two nuggets to put in your bag on your road to leadership. Thank you kindly, and again, my name is Keith Major.